Hey ladies, so today's question comes from a future mom who writes, do you think pets actually prepares you for kids or is it totally different? I would say that in some ways, yes, having a pet does prepare you to have a kid, but also it's completely different from having a kid. So we chose to get a puppy. We got her right I think around 8 weeks. I wanted to get a pet before I had kids because I wanted to have the time to be able to train that dog and also make sure that I felt comfortable with that dog, that I had this relationship already built, this trust already built before I had kids. So I thought like it was like this natural progression, get a job, get a house, get a dog, like then have kids. At least that's what it was in my mind. So once we got her, the first night she came home, we decided to set up a crate because we really wanted to, crate train her. So the first night we put her in her bed. Oh my word. Neither of us slept. She cried and cried and cried and cried the whole night. And we probably took her out to relieve herself at least twice during the first night because we were also trying to figure out like how to potty train her. If you get a pup that is having a really hard time adjusting to, being alienated from its mom, you might also experience a lot of similarity of what it's like once your baby is brought home and you have to do the feedings and the night wakings and the changing of the diaper and the crying. All of that was a big wake-up call for us to just be like, oh my gosh, is this what it's like when people have kids? Because this is exhausting. We did thankfully figure out a situation for her to rest and for us to rest only a few nights after we brought her home. So that was like a much shorter window than what we had as, like new parents. Because when you have a new baby, you have to get up and you have to feed them, maybe at least once a night for several weeks. Typically, I think it's like twice a night. So there's just a much longer period of exhaustion when you obviously have a kid because a kid grows at a slower rate than a puppy. Now, the other thing that I would say that having a puppy or a pet is similar is you have to be more responsible. You have to also kind of figure out like, okay, how are you going to train this dog or this pet? Like for cats, obviously you don't necessarily have this step, but with a puppy, you have to figure out like, okay, how do you react as a pet parent to the dog when they are doing, things that they shouldn't be? And then also what kind of method are you going to use to train your dog? Every dog is different as far as like what type of rewards they thrive on. Like some dogs are food motivated. Thankfully, my dog is very food motivated. Other dogs are more affection motivated. So, trying to figure that out is very similar to what you may experience when you go through actually trying to train and coach and like help your child understand the rules of your home and like how to act in this world, having like consequences and also like motivating behavior. So I would say that even though it's very different, there are some similarities that may give you some insight into how you personally respond. Like if your dog chews up a cord, what is your natural way that you react to that cord being chewed? Or, I have heard of puppies chewing holes into walls, like seeing how you naturally are responding in those moments. Like, are you very quick to anger or are you, like a little bit more slow to anger? Are you, how do you respond to your pet? That can translate very much to how might you respond to your child? How quickly are you irritated or annoyed by your pet? Well, that's also going to kind of translate to when you have kids. So all of those things can give you really good insights into your personality and the things that you maybe need to work on or plan for or try to think through how to so that way your natural response is more in line with how you might want to be as a parent. But it also will give you really good insight if you have a pet with your partner too and seeing like how are they responding. Is this someone that would be safe to have a child with? So that's something to like think about. And I know that can be a little bit of like a tough conversation, a tough reality to also like translate that to, but it is something to be aware of and be recognizing if there's any major flags that you just want to like think about before you decide to proceed with, building your family with this other person. The other thing that is also important to think about is your financial priorities. So when you have a pet, especially with a dog, as a puppy, there are a lot of expenses that you know that there's going to be expenses, but you don't know exactly how much everything's going to cost until you're in it. And that's very similar to being a parent, where you know, okay, I'm going to have to care for this child. I know there's going to be diapers and clothing and possibly formula and food and childcare and all of this. But you don't really know all of the price tags of all of those things until you're in that situation. Just like with a pet, like you get the pet and then maybe they have some really negative like health challenges that they go through, and you have to, maybe they need to be on a medication, or maybe they need to be spayed or neutered, or, there's also like licenses that you need to have for, where you live, and, all of those types of things. Well, all of that comes with a price tag. And some of those things like makes you, if you're in a situation where you now then have to adjust your own finances to be able to pay for these new responsibilities, it can be really good training ground for when you are a parent. And I think that now, obviously, like with a pet, some people are like, oh, if I have a pet, I'm like, it's my pet for life. I would never rehome the pet. Like I would, sacrifice everything for this pet that I've, made a responsibility to or have an obligation for. Well, in some ways, like, I think that there's also this other side to pet parenting that's like, okay, well, I'm going to, this is a pet and it's not a child, whereas there's a much higher level of responsibility once you have a child, obviously. So kind of like some people that come into being pet parents, they aren't thinking about the finality of it in that way, whereas when you become a parent, it is very final. And then, of course, is like the time commitment and the responsibility for that. So with a pet, obviously, you can leave a pet at home for several hours at a time. And with a baby, you cannot. Like, yes, you can find a babysitter. Like, yes, you can, set up certain childcare arrangements, but you most likely are going to have a much shorter time frame leaving a baby with someone else in the care of someone else versus a pet in the care of someone else. And of course, this can go based off of your own personal preferences on how you choose to raise your child. Like if you're okay, leaving them with a trusted person for a week and away, like, all of those variables come into like how they're different, but also being a pet parent can help you put you in the mindset of like, oh, like we need to figure out someone that we trust to leave our dog with. Some people that you may have in your life, you're just being like, okay, I do not trust them to take care of my dog, or I do not trust that if I left my pet with them that they would, come back with the same mannerisms or the same training traits that we had left them in the care of said person. So like, for example, if you have a friend that their own dog eats table scraps and begs profusely, and you've done all of this training with your own dog, that may not be the type of person that you want to, leave your dog with for an extended vacation. So all of those questions that you would have in line for your pets can be really helpful for you to at least start training your thought processes for when you become a parent. Is this person a trustworthy person? Is this person someone that we know loves and cares for our child, but also that we can trust to, respect the boundaries that we put in place for our child, are all things that can really translate very well for when you have a pet to when you have a kid. But also at the same time, like a pet is a pet, like it's not your child. Like if something happened with, our dog, I would be devastated. But if something, of course, happened to my son, like that would hit, that would impact me significantly far greater because it would be my child. So does a pet prepare you for kids? Yes. But also it's very different. Obviously, there's a lot of things to think about before you become a pet or a pet parent. Just like there's a lot of things to think about before you decide to have kids. If you're, approaching it in that way where you're really contemplating it and it's not just kind of thrust upon you. Like sometimes pets can be just all of a sudden next day you're a pet parent, so you got to figure it out. But let me know your thoughts on this whole conversation. I would love to continue this discussion in the comments, but here we take questions from moms for moms. So if you have any additional questions or a future topic you would like to discuss, you can either drop it below in the comments or you can use the submission link below, and hopefully we'll see it on a future episode.